Lovecraft Country is a book about racism that was written by the one type of person most affected by it, a white man. Hello, geeks and ghouls. We talk about Lovecraft Country. It was read in part 3, in week 3 of the horror mayhem, and the theme was cosmic horror. And like week 2, it was kind of a miss because it was not exactly cosmic horror, and that's quite a subversion of expectations when it's got Lovecraft on the cover. But I wanted this book for quite some time now. I think I got it last spring, and I clearly read it so I can watch the series. I have watched episode 1 of the HBO series, and you know what I thought after watching this episode? The author of the book is black, right? And it's not. And I could feel that because that's the main problem of the book. I know I'm the person to say that, you know what, it's not about the color of your skin or your gender or your sexuality or whatever when you write a book. It's about writing a good book. But here you can feel something is off. And this is probably because the author is not a black man himself, like the characters in this book. Because the way racism is presented in this book doesn't feel authentic. It feels stuff the author has read and he tries to convey them on paper. But we'll get there eventually when we talk about the review of this book. We'll talk about the plot. So the book starts in Chicago 1954, so basically we're 1 year before the Jim Crow, the segregation law, is repealed. And we've got Atticus Turner, who is a Korea veteran, and he returns to Chicago, and he learns that his father, who they're estranged, has gone missing. He went to a small town in New England called Arden, and this is where Lovecraft Country comes from because it reminds them of Arkham, the fictional town around which a lot of Lovecraft stories are. And Atticus and his uncle George is publishing the Safe Traveling Guide for people of color. They don't use that word in this book, alright? It's and Atticus and his uncle George, they're big sci-fi fans. There is even a whole discussion about the racism of Lovecraft because Atticus was reading Lovecraft and liking his books, but Lovecraft had some weird ideas, and I mean, we've done this discussion a lot of times, alright? He was what he was. So they travel there and weird things happen on the road, and I was expecting it to be a road trip through a segregated America when they encounter some weird stuff and they finally get to Arkham, but it's over and done with very fast, within the first 100 pages. So basically this book is 8 stories that tie together, and they have to do with Atticus and his lineage and his friends and family as they get into web of occult groups in the Jim Crow era. And of course, yes, there is this issue of they're black in a very segregated society, so there is this fact, and it plays a role throughout the book. Actually, as the stories go on, or the book, it feels the racism aspect feels very well thought out, less not cartoonish actually, because I guess that a lot of the things that are happening in this book, they're based on real stories. The author had 30 years of planning this book after he learned that sci-fi fans of color were not welcome in the 50s, or about the Green Book, the equivalent of the Safe Travel Guide. So he clearly put research and work into this book. And it shows. I mean, after we get to stories of sheriff harassing travelers for the first 50 pages, it all shifts gear towards something different. And after a while, it all gets about the different factions of magicians. The horror element was not quite there. It's more like urban fantasy or like a campaign of Call of Cthulhu RPG, I guess, without the other gods coming in. But it feels a lot like an RPG campaign. We have the characters and they encounter certain situations. We have a cast of regulars, and I think that every story, every one of the first 7 stories, is centered around one of them. There are ghost houses, there are magic potions, there are a lot of ideas here, and it never goes stale. The stories never overstay their welcome, which is quite a feat, but I didn't enjoy this book. I feel that while the author has done his homework, he doesn't quite capture what racism is, because of having never lived in the 50s and having never lived as a person of color. There's this element that it lacks the organic, it lacks the subtlety I was expecting to encounter in a book like that. Clearly, it was published in 2016 and made a splash because it was very relevant. It was around the time that the US did, I believe, the collective people in the US have been ready to scratch that scab of segregation and racism in a different way, and it addressed a lot of the talk about, Lovecraft being not a nice guy. But I felt that it was lacking this authenticity, and it kept me out of the story. The fact that the main characters were sci-fi fans felt a bit pandering to me, to be honest. I was not that enthused about them making reference, and it felt like alien, I guess. It gave me this idea of, yes, this is some guys role-playing a Call of Cthulhu campaign in the 50s. There is something I've noticed that I was expecting it to be a much larger theme. The first cult, the first coven, the characters encounter, they are very focused on stripping humans of their identity. Because there is this theory that Adam, in Adam and Eve, has named every creature on Earth, and this name is some sort of a trap for it. It set it in stone. So the idea is that they want to undo the naming and return to the primary existence. So in a way, the bad guys of the book want to strip people of their identity, and the main struggle of the main characters are their identity and how they cope with it in a world where it's against them because of it. And it wasn't explored. I felt that it lost a lot of maybe I was reading things, to be honest, or maybe it was cut at some draft, I guess. Yeah, it would be a very heady theme, but it was an entertaining read. It was entertaining urban fantasy read, I guess, historical urban fantasy with elements of cosmic horror, and it was an interesting look into the 50s America and segregation and how it affected people. And yes, actually, since the focus of the book was not people being racists, but elder gods and coven of wizards and warlocks and witches, yeah, I guess it's entertaining. It's less about preaching about the terror, it's about delivering a story. But I never got into the story. And the way we hop from character to character in small stories, it was an opportunity to learn about the characters in the book and see different perspectives of them. But at the same time, I couldn't empathize with them. And that's very important. And the fact that they get out of hairy situations scot-free, Yeah, it's not that I felt the danger. There was a lot of, I don't know if I want to say hipsterism, but there is clearly this book lacked bleakness of a Lovecraft, of a good Lovecraftian story. So yeah, it was a fun read. Definitely give it a go. Maybe you'll enjoy it more, but I was not super enthused about it. So if you read this book, leave a comment below, like, subscribe, etc. And I'll see you soon. Stay spooky.